In this video, we're going to look at why certain countries are more efficient at producing certain goods than others. Let's take a look. So various countries have different levels of efficiency in terms of how many units they can produce of a given good. And that depends on several things. So to give you a bit of an idea here is think about it as you are operating a kitchen and you're producing, let's say, pizzas to be sold as frozen pizzas to be bought at the grocery store. But you're producing pizzas and ideally you produce as much as possible. So if you compare your kitchen or your production facility to someone else, you have to compare a few things to know who's going to be able to produce the most amount of pizzas. So the first thing you might wonder, well, how many workers you have in both places? Well, let's say in both places you have 20 workers. Cool. So the next step afterwards is to know how much you can actually produce. You can't just think about the amount of workers that you have, but you have to think about the level of equipment that you have. So that's often referred to as the capital, the physical capital, the goods that you have to produce. So whether they're knives that you might need, ovens, things to roll your dough, different things to mix your sauce, whatever it may be, you need certain devices to be able to produce pizzas as efficiently as possible. So if we start from that first point that you have 20 workers in both companies, and in one of them you only have like a few knives, a few cutting boards, a few cheese graters, and then the other one you have like sufficient that everyone has a tool available to them. Well, obviously this person that has access to more capital will be more productive. There's going to be more pizzas being produced at that place than the first one, even if the workers are of equivalent talent and whatnot. So number of workers, labor, is a factor of production. Level of physical capital is another factor of production. And then afterwards, you could think, well, you might have two different locations that have the same amount of workers, the same equipment, but one's producing a lot more than the other. Well, then it's a question of having different quality of workers. And different quality of workers could be due to a multitude of factors, but one of them is based on this concept of human capital, is if you have these workers that are well educated, well trained in the task at hand, well, they're going to be more productive at producing the same product with the same tools as other people because they have just more experience, more training, more education in the matter. Therefore, they can cut things faster, they can do various tasks much more rapidly than the other individual. So those are the three main kind of categories that determines efficiency. So you might have certain countries that have a lot of workers, cheap workers to produce things, but it may still make more sense to produce this somewhere else where people are better trained, have better education, that have better knowledge on how they do things. And then you also always have to consider the fact that if you have too many workers but just not enough good equipment, well, that might slow down the process as well. So from a business perspective, if you're trying to operate as efficiently as possible, you have to keep in mind which of these factors of production do you have in abundance and which ones can you use more of. So if I think about this kitchen example, let's say it's a kitchen that you're cooking things. Well, if you have 20 workers, but you only have one oven, there's just so much food that you're going to be able to serve on a given night to the public at this restaurant. So hiring one more worker to satisfy more production is not going to be very productive because of this concept called the diminishing marginal product of labor. And this idea of diminishing marginal product of something is based on this something, here in this case labor, it could be capital, is based on this idea that the more you add of this factor of production, here in this case the more workers you add, the extra production that you get, the extra amount of products that you can produce on a given day, fall over time. And the reason why it falls over time is because of this idea that if you're not expanding the other factors of production, here namely capital, like the amount of ovens available, knives, and other things that are required to be efficient. If you're not expanding on those things, well, over time, even if you were to add one more clone, like these are perfectly equal individuals. It's not that you're hiring the best people first and the worst people last. They're all equivalent. Even if you're add an extra person, that extra person would not produce that much more. Because if they have nothing available, they might just be the person running around between people getting the different ingredients from the fridge, throwing out the trash, sweeping the floors, all useful things, but probably does not have as big of an impact as if that worker wasn't there. And instead you would have like an extra oven or an extra something that would allow the previous worker to produce a lot more than before. So always keep in mind what you have in abundance and what can you need more of. So if you think of certain countries on this planet where you have a lot of workers in abundance but just not enough tools, for them having more tools may help their production a lot more than having more workers. Whereas if you take a factory that has a ton of tools that a lot of them are just sitting around not doing anything, well, in that factory, adding one more worker is going to help more than adding an extra tool available. Main two ones that we look at is labor capital. Then you could also think about the education, that human capital. And then there's other ones to consider, like in terms of like access to raw materials, like land resources also has an impact. And then there's technological knowledge, this idea that you can be trained, that's like education and training helps improve efficiency, helps improve production. But if there's no more technological knowledge out there, well, then it just makes these people that are getting trained have access to even better tools. So it's not just a training process, but like the theory that was developed, the ideas that have been developed can also have an impact as well. But keep that in mind that there's different factors that lead to certain levels of productivity, efficiency, and based on having too much of one of these categories and not enough of another leads to these diminishing returns. So hopefully you could start to understand why certain countries are in a process that they need more of certain products and how some of these countries can increase production drastically when they get access to those products. In a developed country, the balance is clear, like between capital and labor, but in some of the developing countries, it's not as good. And that's why when they acquire more capital, they could expand on production much more rapidly than a country that has a good balance already. So hopefully that clarifies efficiency between countries. Catch you on the next one. If you found this video interesting, please consider subscribing or joining my class where I guide you to apply and expand on the information found in these videos to real-life examples. Have a good day.